Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. And I hope it is a Happy New Year. This is our first regular board meeting, but it's a special board meeting. So I welcome all of those in attendance. We have received regrets from Trustee Linda Stone, Trustee Paul Crawford, and Student Trustee James Kay. Moving on, I will call this meeting to order. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and our schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, we learn, and we live. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, thank you. We all received the agenda yesterday. Hopefully you have it in front of you. Could I have a motion to approve that agenda? Thank you, Christine, seconded by Nikki. And Arlene, I welcome you. I'm glad that you have arrived.
Thank you. My apologies for being late, Madam Chair.
That's fine. Thank you. This is going to be, we don't know how long this meeting is going to last, but we really only have one item on our agenda. And that's item 5A, approval of resolutions of the Standing Committee. So I turn it over to the chair of the Standing Committee, Trustee Christine Thatcher. Christine?
Thank you, Chair Morton. The Standing Committee met on January 3rd, 2022. At that time, 3 resolutions were adopted by the committee pursuant to motions brought forward by Trustee Lundquist. The motions can be found on page 2 of the package. And with that, I will turn it over to Trustee Lundquist. Nikki?
Thank you. So there were 3 motions that were passed, and I will again move each motion separately because we had determined that we would separate them out into 3 separate motions. But I did want to say this because I know there will be people joining us tonight who were not at the meeting on Monday, that these motions were introduced with an understanding that having schools open for learning is actually really important to the educational and social development of children, and that a safer return to in-person learning was both possible and necessary. Having said that, I will move the first motion. I move 1A, that the Director of Education and/or her designates take all reasonable steps to publicly report data to the extent it is available on confirmed and presumed cases in DDSB schools. Oh, I'm sorry, this is all part of the same one, and I should be more clear about that. That the DDSB ensure families and staff have a mechanism for self-reporting for those who have access to tests, and see that the board provide information on school and class closures and unusual rates of absenteeism in school communities, and that should the government alter its direction on the collection of this data, the board will revisit its position. So that, Chair Morton, was the motion that was moved, and it was moved for the reasons that I provided, but also because the government has abdicated, in my view, its responsibility for providing very basic information to people in which they really require in order to make informed decisions about the health and safety of themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. We need a seconder for Trustee Lundquist's motion.
I'd be happy to second that.
Thank you, Trustee Templeton. We are now open for discussion. If you would just like to raise your hand, if I could recognize you. The first hand I see is Trustee Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support the motion. I won't be superfluous in the commentary with regards to it. I would agree that it's short-sighted on the government's part to be able to stop tracking numbers. I think that everyone here, regardless of where we sit in our careers or professions, know that that which gets measured gets done. That which is measured is also taken care of as well. So I would agree it's short-sighted. I recognize, I don't even understand why the ministry is doing that, to be quite honest. But I think that it would behoove us, as most school boards are certainly advocating for, as well as OPSPA, that these measurements continue to be done. So I'm in full support of being able to ensure that we continue the data collection and make it available where necessary, and so that parents can have information that's essential in order to be able to ensure the safety of their children in the broader community. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Trustee Braney.
I'll just be very short, Chair Morton. Thank you. I'm in full support of the motion, and very pleased that our board's taking a proactive approach to these issues.
Thank you, Trustee Braney. Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I'm in support of the motion as well, but again, just like to note, I know everybody here recognizes it, but the data that we will be collecting is not based on the same data that was previously collected, because there will not be access necessarily to test, but it is going to be based also around a self-reporting mechanism from families on tests as well. So, and that I know that we will make sure that that caveat or the context of the data is also written so that people can understand the context of the data.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Trustee Lundquist, would you like to speak again?
I would, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, because I actually recognize that this is not going to be perfect data, right? It's imperfect data, and I want to acknowledge that. But my view has always been it's better to have some rather than none. You can't make any decisions with none, so I would rather provide whatever we can. And I am confident that the board will provide the appropriate caveats on whatever reporting mechanism it chooses to use for this, to ensure that people understand the limitations of the data.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. I will call the vote, and I don't think it's necessary that I read all 4 parts of that motion, but if you'd like me to, I would gladly oblige. Then I will call the vote, and we will move to stadium viewing. Thank you, and I didn't have to ask you to use your green check marks or your red X's. I'm looking at the results, and yes, this vote is 9 for the motion, 0 opposed, so definitely this motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to our second motion, I'm going to go back to Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The motion that was presented at standing was, I move that masking for all students, including those in kindergarten and junior kindergarten, be made mandatory during in-person learning, subject to credible human rights exceptions only. And I will raise my hand to speak to this in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. we first need somebody to second that motion. And I see trustee Braney's hand is up.
I
You
will
are
second that. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Braney. We are now open for discussion. And Chris, I see your hand up. Trustee Braney?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in strong, sorry, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sorry, Chris, just point of order, the mover of the motion should always speak first.
Oh,
So
that's right.
Nikki should have that opportunity. Sorry, Chris.
That's right. That's my mistake, Michael. I will go to Nikki.
Thank you. I didn't want to be presumptuous but I think this is actually very important because I've received a lot of calls and emails, and I want to speak to that if I may. So I'll do my best to stay in the 2 minutes, but I think there's some important context here that needs to be addressed. So let me just sort of gather my thoughts because it's challenging. This is the most challenging of the three, I think, and so I want to give it its fair shake. So I've received messages from parents opposed and parents support, teachers opposed, although not many in support, educators of various grades in support, etc. But what I really want to say is this: there is a history here with this particular motion. It's been raised before, and it was not something that we adopted. And we were very conscious and conscientious about understanding that context was really relevant in these discussions. And the context that we have now is rather different from the context we had at the last point. We had a discussion about this particular thing. And I went back and I actually listened to the remarks of Dr. Kyle from Public Health at the time, and I've been paying attention to what's happening. So I've had some difficult conversations today with people who are suggesting that I haven't read studies, I haven't bothered to understand the science of this, and that's absolutely not correct. So what I know is there are conflicting views on masking. There are conflicting views on masking of smaller children in particular, but there is plenty of evidence to support the idea that masking actually is an important piece of the suite of health and safety measures. So I'm going to observe that many school boards have implemented masking requirements, that the CDC, for example, has indicated that universal indoor masking should be mandatory in the school setting. I understand that Sick Kids had some disagreement and there was not consensus on a lot of these issues around masking. I have gone and read every study I can, every credible peer-reviewed study that was available to me I have read on masking, and I'm happy to provide that to other trustees or anybody who is listening and who is concerned about this issue. But for me, this comes down to we have to balance the health and safety needs of the people in the school system. That is our obligation. So we have health and safety obligations, we have obligations related to students and to staff. And the challenge with this particular issue is that the youngest learners in our system are largely unvaccinated. Many of them cannot be vaccinated. And so there is greater risk there in terms of acquiring and transmitting disease. I have looked around the province. I know that, Ottawa, Carleton, Lakehead, Upper Canada District School Board, and others have adopted these kinds of measures. And we're doing it in a very measured way. And we're doing it because the circumstances we face today are different. We're in the middle of a massive COVID wave. Just yesterday, there were no ambulances available in Durham region because of the downflow of illness and the impact of that. I don't think it's responsible to contribute to that. I really don't. And so to me, this is actually one way we can ensure that we don't contribute to it, that we do what we can to ensure that our staff are protected. We can't afford to lose teachers right now. We already have a challenge in the system in that regard. And I want to keep those little ones safe. So I understand that this is a challenging issue for some people. And I understand that there are some concerns around social and cognitive communications and whatnot. But I just want to read one quick thing, and I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to be really fast about it. So there was a really interesting report from a Dr. Kimberly Dickinson and Dr. Guibert who Dr. Dickinson is actually a pediatric pulmonologist. She's a fellow at Johns Hopkins, and she, in her view, and in the view of many who have signed on to this, is that masking actually is necessary because it creates a barrier that reduces the spread. And I know that there is some disagreement about that, but there is a very instructive commentary from her on mask mythbusters and common questions that I would encourage people to look at. You can find it on healthychildren.org. And I raise that because in my view, and in the view of many, and not just me, we have to do what is reasonable. There is a precautionary principle. You take whatever steps are reasonably available to you to deal with novel illness, and that's what we have. We have a variant that is spreading rapidly through our communities. One of the trustees has already commented that it's moved beyond pandemic into endemic. We don't have testing available to us anymore. So to me, this is actually one responsible way of doing what we can to minimize risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Trustee Braney?
Thank you, Chair Morton. Yeah, I appreciate and thank Trustee Lundquist for bringing this motion forward. As I said before, we're dealing with a completely different scenario with COVID than we were originally, and I just feel very strongly that we need to be proactive with this and follow that measure and protect students and staff best we can with the masking due to the variant and just due to the catastrophic effects of spread. I don't think I'd feel very comfortable not doing this and implementing this. So I'm definitely and strongly in favor of it, and I think it's another good proactive step for our board to take, given the dilemma that we're dealing with right now. So thank you, Chair Morton.
Thank you, Trustee Braney. Moving on to Trustee Templeton. Scott, you are muted. Scott, you are still muted.
There we go. That's better. Give me 1 second. I've been an advocate for mask wearing for the past 17 months and believed all along that all grades should be required to wear masks. I've seen enough evidence from Dr. Kieran Moore, Chief Medical Officer of Health Ontario, and our own Dr. Robert Kyle, Medical Health Officer of Health, that wearing a mask causes no physical harm to anyone. At least in most articles I have read. I'm going to ask Nikki to send me some along the post that she found. If the small percentage of adults in the rooming house and apartment building I am property manager of believed in wearing their masks instead of thinking they are stronger than COVID, well, there's a good chance I would not have COVID today. For those who know me, they are aware of how cautious I am of following protocols like washing hands, wearing a mask, physical distance when you can. I have hand sanitizer in both vehicles, all my doorways coming into the house, all doorways going into the properties where I take care of, as I always think safety first. So in supporting this motion, I am on the side of safety for children, teachers, and staff at the DDSB. And it would be great to see this pass and put into place, as I hoped 17 months ago. After all, our children, students adapt better than most adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Moving on to Trustee Thatcher. Christine?
Thank you. And through you, Chair Morton, I have received a number of emails since the meeting on Monday night, and I've read each of them carefully. The majority of them are from teachers and early childhood educators who have made very strong cases, primarily in favor of masking. I want to say that initially I was not in favor of masking at that level, at the FDK, full day kindergarten level. But I feel that I've kept an open mind and realized that throughout the last, well, just under 2 years, things have changed quite often, and we've had to respond accordingly. I am in support of this motion, and I feel that if this will help our kids get back to school on the 17th of January, then I would like to just indicate that I would be very happy to support the motion, and for that very reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Moving on to Trustee Edwards. Donna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I too have received both for and against emails, actually almost equal amount at this point in time. There is a lack of studies or research on long-term impacts on child social, emotional, and communication development in an extended mask-wearing learning environment. What we do know is that the first year of a child's life is where speech and language starts to emerge, and that an eight-month-old infant starts to make a dramatic shift of focusing on the eyes to the mouth region of the people that are talking to them. And lip reading is actually part of a child's speech development. Children rely on lip reading to differentiate phonetic sounds, and it becomes a more important strategy used when the child is in a multi-language or bilingual household, like our ESL learners. Children in kindergarten are still developing their interpersonal skills, and masking eliminates over half the face and facial movements to interpret emotions. We have to make a concerted effort to teach children different strategies to help them interpret emotions, like listening to tone of the voice, eye expressions such as crinkling around the eyes, although that works to me because I always have them, to see that they're happy, or wide eyes for fear or surprise, and body posture. Masks also hide identity and decrease recognition abilities. In fact, studies indicate that a child's facial recognition ability is decreased by 20% when faces are masked. It's also interesting that adult's ability is decreased by 15%. And a child starts to develop the ability to look at another person's face holistically at around age 4 or 5, and meaning that they are starting to develop the ability to look at a person's face with spatial awareness or facial features as a whole. In a class where all the child can see is half a face, it is going to have an impact on the area of development. Again, but we don't know what the long-term impact is. The good news is that children's brain is more plastic, if you wish, and if one channel of deciphering information is blocked, the brain will aid in increasing other skills or abilities to compensate. And there, as Nikki mentioned, there is a difference of opinion, and Scott also mentioned around experts on what the long-term effects of mask wearing for children are going to be. However, there is an agreement that the ability for a child to adapt or compensate is dependent on the child, particularly for children with communication disorders or special education needs. I have a huge concern of further delay to speech and language, social and emotional development for our kindergarten students who have special education needs, ESL needs, or students who may not yet be identified with learning needs. The impact will be even higher for children in schools identified with low EDI scores or at-risk schools. Researchers actually state to mitigate the impact, teachers or ECAs or EAs would have to employ additional strategies to help develop emotional, social, and communication skills of every child in their classroom. Additional staff and resources would have to be allocated to assess and provide early intervention. Parents would have to be made aware and commit to increased face-to-face communication at home to compensate for the hours of mask learning at school. We also know that during what we have considered a normal times, we have limited resources to support our students with special needs. And as a board, we've always supported the overspending of the special education portfolio. We have heard from teachers and EAs, ECs, and staff that our resources are stretched thin, even more so during the pandemic, or should I now say endemic. So I cannot see how staff can really assure me that additional resources can be added to support or intervene the impact of mask wearing this, next, or future years of the kindergarten students with special needs, ESL students, students at risk, or yet to be assessed or identified. I will also note that we have received, as Nikki mentioned, no additional direction or masking from Durham's Chief Medical Officer, whose advice the Ministry of Education has directed boards to follow. The TDSB has had mandated masking for kindergarten students since September of 2020, and their COVID rates percentage-wise have been same or higher than the DDSB's. Germany has mandated N95 masking and has made no difference to the number of COVID cases. Sweden has never issued a lockdown or mandated masks. Their strategies have been focused on social distancing, working from home, vaccination, and hand washing. Their COVID statistics are very similar to other European countries. We cannot guarantee that mandatory masking alone is the panacea to limiting transmissions of this new, this or any new COVID variant coming along, like Florona, which is a combination of the flu and coronavirus. I believe it is the combined health and safety protocols that and the efforts of our very diligent and hardworking staff in cleaning, monitoring, and reporting that has kept our DDS schools safer. I've reviewed our board data with all staff and other students within the school masked, existing health and safety protocols, which includes strongly encourage kindergarten students wearing masks and continued diligence of our staff with parents in the community to adhere to these protocols. We have managed to keep students safe as much as we possibly can. Until we are provided with real evidence that supports mask wearing alone will have a significant impact on reducing transmissions in the schools and kindergarten children, and not just people's opinions, and that includes mine, I will not support this motion. A decision that is not based on evidence data, but definitely will have further detrimental impact on the development and learning of our most vulnerable students and the future is not good governance. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Student Trustee Kayla Malcolm, we would like to hear your voice.
Hi, through you, Madam Chair. Like the other trustees, I've received a number of emails over the course of 24 hours from parents of students who are in kindergarten, the majority of which disagree with our motion of making masks mandatory for health, social, and cognitive reasons. As student trustee, I'm required to bring their voices to the board, and I want us to all keep in mind the voices of those parents who are sending their children to our schools when passing or not passing this motion. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Moving on to Trustee Barrett.
Thank you, Chair Morton, and perhaps with a little bit more brevity, I will not be supporting the motion for many of the reasons that Trustee Edwards has pointed out. But if I to narrow them down to three, I think that first of all, certainly as a business leader, we have been following the rules and public health recommendations. We still do not have a recommendation by our public health official in order to be able to mask. Secondly, there are many studies that are cited, but there are much data that is out there as well that shows the ineffectiveness of masking, in fact, for young children. Donna has cited a couple of examples. The primary, I think, more conducive piece to ensuring the transmissibility of disease, and I know that's not a word, but is certainly being able to ensure that we have adequate mask, ventilation, etc., for our teachers and people in the classroom, And third is I don't profess to be an expert, but I have not been able to find anything that is a definitive opinion. And like the rest of us at this table, I have received many, many emails, and they are running at about 50-50. I didn't support this the last time. I don't feel that it changes dramatically. I understand the element of the Omicron that is going across, but yet experts have not lined up behind a singular position that masking is the opiate in order to be able to ensure the lack of, or to dissipate the spread. So for those reasons, I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Trustee Forbes, Darlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I really do understand the points that trustees Barrett and Edwards have brought forward. But, you know, in terms of impacts to students with special needs, online learning and being removed from physical classrooms have also had an impact on all students, including those with special needs. So I think whatever motion we can pass here to improve safety, equity of access to our teachers in a way that allows for the diversity of educational needs to be met is really important. So for those reasons, I will be supporting this motion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. Trustee Lundquist, your hand was up first, but I am going to go to Trustee Barnes because Nikki, the last word will be yours. Trustee Barnes?
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak to this because my internet's a little wanky, but I will not be supporting this motion either. I think it's a 50-50. Based on the new Omicron virus, sorry, it is way more transmissible, which there's a division of whether or not cloth mask versus N95 mask would be more efficient for in the classroom. So I supporting teachers with the proper masking and ventilation, and allowing our youngest learners to be able to learn in class. The decision is I will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Patrice. The last word is yours, Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, because I have actually done a fairly significant amount of research because I'm worried about this, right? This is not something I came to quickly or with no thought. So I do want to say that in the article that I referenced earlier by Drs. Dickinson and Gibert, one of the things that they actually discuss at great length, and this is relevant to Donna's concerns, is that they're going to have to be strategies for navigating the social and emotional obstacles and challenges that are going to result from some mask wearing. And they're confident that can be done with intention in classrooms. So not with huge investments necessarily, but with actual intention in terms of the way we teach, about expression and eyes and body language and the rest of it. And one of the conclusions that they reached was that it actually has the potential to accelerate education and communication for kids, including kids with special needs. So I'm not discounting that view. I agree that it's been spoken of at great length and I understand it, but I think there's a flip side to it, and that's the challenge that we have here. There's a flip side to everything, and this really is about determining, and with your heart and with your mind and with your knowledge, what makes sense in the context of this particular stage of the pandemic. I'm going to just refer to a comment that was made last summer by Public Health when they came to speak to us. Our public health officer actually said that he was in no position to second guess the Ministry of Education. That's what was said. And to me, we better second guess the Ministry of Education, and we better second guess this government, because we have seen what is happening when we don't, which is this stage of the pandemic with no testing available to people who likely have corona. So I'm prepared to second guess. I'm prepared to look at what other public health officers have said, including York Region, including Toronto, and all of the ones that surround us. So we might have an outlier here, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to automatically defer, because there are plenty of opinions that are very, very different from that one. I know this is challenging and it's difficult, and I'm hoping that it is a short-term plan to address the current situation. Nothing is written in stone. Nothing means we can't come back and address things differently as the situation changes. But for me, the reality is the situation has changed quite dramatically from the last time we had this discussion. And even with the comments that have been made, I view this as really an essential feature protecting health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. We will now vote on the motion, and the motion reads like this: that masking for all students, including those in kindergarten and junior kindergarten, be made mandatory during in-person learning, subject to credible human rights exceptions only. Thank you for the stadium view. And we know that the green check mark is in favor, the red X is opposed.
Trustee Forbes is missing from the stadium.
I realize that.
Sorry, my internet died. I apologize. I'm just using a hotspot for my phone.
Thank you. And the result that I see is 5 supporting the motion, 3 opposed to the motion. So the motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to the third motion. And I will go back to Trustee Lundquist for the third motion.
Thank you, Chair Morton. I almost called you Martin, and that's not your name, and I'm aware of your name. It's just a misspeak on my part. So the third motion is, I move that the DDSB, through its Director of Education, liaises with regional public health authorities and seeks a commitment to hold accessible and equitable vaccination clinics for staff and students of the DDSB in high needs areas and/or in areas where vaccination rates remain lower than average, so as to facilitate ease of access prior to the scheduled return to school on January 17th, 2022. Thank you, Chair Morton.
Thank you. I'm asking for somebody to second that motion. I see Scott Templeton with his hand up. Thank you, Scott. We are now open for discussion, but now I'm going to remember to go to Trustee Lundquist first.
Thank you, Chair Morton. I don't intend to speak to this in any great length. To me, this is just one of the obvious things that can and should be done. There is continued discussion about the importance of vaccine uptake in combating this wave. And to me, this is just something that we can and should do. We should be seeking that on behalf of our students and on behalf of education workers. And I'm confident that Director Marsh or her designates will do their very best to ensure that we can do the best we can to get immunizations in the arms of people who want them. Thank you.
Thank you. Other people who would like to contribute to this discussion? Feel free to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands. Nikki, if you would like to make a closing remark.
I'm not going to argue against myself, so I'll just quietly step back and I'm happy to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. We will call the vote, and again, I will repeat the motion that the Durham District School Board, through its Director of Education, liaises with regional public health authorities and seeks a commitment to hold accessible and equitable vaccination clinics for staff and students of the DDSB in high needs areas and/or in areas where vaccination rates remain lower than average, so as to facilitate ease of access prior to the scheduled return to school on January 17th, 2022. And I don't have to tell you that the green check mark or the red X should be used. That is a unanimous decision. 7 people are voting for that motion. That motion has passed. Thank you. Michael, your hand is up.
It wasn't, but it was going to be. I don't know if you were clairvoyant or something, Chair Morton, but it wasn't up, but I was going to, if I may.
Certainly. The floor is yours, Michael.
I do have 2 additional amendments to the motions that have been brought forward by Trustee Lundquist that I would also like to be able to put on the table to be able to, I would think, complement the initiative that has gone forward. I have provided them to Kathy. I'm not sure if we could share those in anticipation of the meeting, but I was going to use this as an opportunity to build upon some of the initiatives that, as I said, have been outlined. I'm not sure, Kathy, if we could share those and I could speak to them.
Yes, I think Robert's going to share his screen.
Okay, all right, thank you, Kathy. So these are the 2 additional that I would wanted to be able to talk to, and I think that they build on what has been brought forward. I would propose, I'm calling it number 4, is that the Durham District School Board support the Ontario Public School Boards Association's January 2nd, 2022 statement, which emphasizes the importance of getting students back into in-person learning safely by providing priority access to vaccinations for students and school staff, continued access to PCR testing, N95 masking provided to school staff as soon as possible, and that adding COVID-19 to the list of vaccines and the Immunization of School Pupils Act. And we can deal with these as separate motions if you want to, Trustee Morton. That might be the appropriate way of dealing with it. And certainly number 5 is just in a broad perspective, just ensuring that we continue to remind the province of their need to be able to continue to fund COVID-related expenses. So I'm not sure how you want to deal with it, Trustee Morton, but I would certainly make the motion on number 4 as written, and look forward to, if there's a seconder, to be able to have a discussion with regards to it.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have somebody who would second Michael's motion for number 4?
I have a point of order first, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
And I'm cautious about this because I support these motions. So I just want to be clear about this because we have trustees who are not here, and we had a conversation standing on Monday that we couldn't move into an emergency meeting right away and give appropriate notice about these things. And I don't know that these are amendments to the motion versus new motions. So if they're amendments, I suppose we can address them in the context of that, but I'm not sure that it's amending anything. And that's my concern, is that I don't want to run afoul of our own procedural rules. And I'm just looking for some clarification on that. But again, I'm not trying to be difficult because I do support these, all of them.
I also support them, but I can see your reasoning. Because we only have 9 of our 11 trustees here. I'm going to ask Michael, how do you think we should proceed?
There certainly is an argument to be made that in the special board meeting, and I would defer to Patrick Cotter for sure. And maybe it would be actually be best if we started with Patrick Cotter and not myself. So maybe I would, not that I'm circumventing that one, Patrick, but I believe in your role, it would better come from you than from myself. So,
Patrick, we
Thank
would
you,
very
Trustee
much
Barrett.
appreciate your opinion.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett, and through you, Chair Moore. And of course, I'm happy to provide guidance, but ultimately it's the decision of the chair and the Board of Trustees, but happy to provide guidance to the best of my ability. So as has been discussed, section 3.1 of bylaw 1, which provides for special board meetings, indicates that the agenda shall be provided in advance and at least 24 hours notice, which can be waived, but it wasn't in this case. So the 24-hour notice was complied with. And the rule goes on to state that no other business shall be conducted unless all members are present and all consent. So the issue really is does this fit within the definition of other business? And that's a judgment call based on the substance of the motions. I think my opinion is it is different. There are substantive issues in there. For example, requesting that that it be added to the Immunization of Student Pupils Act. That's something that trustees may want to debate. So I think there are substantive matters in here. So my opinion is it is other business and would require all members to be present and consent.
Thank you, Patrick. And I do agree with Patrick. I would hesitate to move. I know that you would have much support for those two motions, Michael, but I think we need to make sure that all 11 trustees are aware that we would be bringing these forward.
I'll acquiesce on that, but I would suggest that as a trustee, I would have a right to amend the motions that Trustee Lundquist put on the table, and therefore could substantially have changed the motions by adding these as amendments. And if agreed to, could have been passed and discussed. However, I am going to acquiesce to the esteemed Patrick Cotter's opinion. And so what I will do then, Chair Morton, is that I will ask this to be placed on the next agenda with the motions as provided for the board meeting as of the third week of January. We can deal with it in that matter. So.
Thank you, Michael. So we will be putting forward those motions on January 17th. And everyone will be well aware. Is there any other business that we need to talk about before I adjourn this meeting? As I said before, Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us this evening. Consider this meeting to be adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.